The Lotus Sutra chapter 15 serves as a prelude to chapter 16's concept of the eternal life of the Buddha, and the chapter surprisingly does so by showing a Buddhist version of a sci-fi movie scene at the outset. So this video helps you visualize this enigmatic scene of the chapter 15 by explaining the Buddhist cosmology, but knowing what the sutra is saying is the half of the story. As I always say in this channel, what matters the most to us as students of Buddhism is to understand what this chapter is implicitly talking about, the reality of your life. With this in mind, after presenting the content of the chapter itself, I will discuss the practical implications of this chapter that you can start applying to your everyday life from today so that you can develop the meaningful relationship with people around you, which includes some dating tips or dating wisdom from the viewpoint of this chapter. I hope you enjoy that as well. If you need a refresher of the earlier chapters of the sutra, I suggest you check out my video about chapter 14 that I linked below. Alright. Let's get started. So this chapter's beginning is important. The sutra says, at that time, those bodhisattva mahasattvas who had come from other lands, as chapter 11 introduced, addressed the Buddha saying, "World-honored one, we will stay here in the Saha world, ardently and diligently protecting, keeping, reading, reciting, copying, and paying homage to this sutra." To this offer, Shakyamuni Buddha basically says, "Thank you guys, but no thanks." Here's what this Shakyamuni says in the sutra. There will be no need for you to protect and keep this sutra, because there already are, here in my Saha world, bodhisattva mahasattvas as numerous as the sands of 60,000 Ganges, each of whom has followers as numerous as the sand of 60,000 Ganges. And then this Lotus Sutra sci-fi scene happens. The sutra says, when the Buddha spoke these words, the ground of the 3,000 great thousandfold lands of the Saha world began trembling and splitting open, and all at once innumerable thousands of millions of bodhisattva mahasattvas sprang up out of it. These bodhisattvas had golden-hued bodies, the 32 marks, and the immeasurable radiance. Up until then, they had all been dwelling in the empty space beneath the Saha world. So what's going on here? This is like a Lotus Sutra version of the Star Wars. I mean, if you are watching this video in the 22nd century or the 23rd century AD, hi, I'm in the 21st century, and there was a movie called Star Wars that went viral that you can probably Google it. The rest of this chapter explains who these bodhisattvas are and who their teacher was. But before we move on, we need some bit of Buddhist cosmology, because the sutra says these bodhisattvas were all dwelling in empty space beneath the Saha world. What does that mean? In Buddhist cosmology, there are many universes, and each of them has a Buddha who takes care of each domain. In this context, the Saha world is the world that we live in, and Shakyamuni Buddha is the Buddha who's responsible for teaching and transforming the sentient beings in that world. So this is very interesting. The Saha world is floating in empty space, that the sutra says, right? And far below the Saha world, wind came from somewhere and forms a wind ring. Above the wind ring, water elements get accumulated, forming a water ring. And above the water ring, which is beneath the Saha world, right, there's a formation of the golden ring. So this structure is beneath the Saha world, and on top of that is a Saha world, which is floating in an empty space. Splitting open, cutting the land, opens up all these rings: golden ring, water ring, and wind ring, and from the below, all these gazillions of bodhisattvas emerge as if they are like a lotus flower. So weird. But I think further surprising thing is that this perfect bodhisattva who emerged out of the earth, rather than out of coming from other lands, is no one other than you yourself, who undertakes the Buddha's work of spreading the Dharma and teaching and transforming sentient beings to get out of suffering. All these rings and symbols are interpreted differently depending on tradition. For instance, like in Chinese Tiantai tradition, this empty space is a Zhou the land of the constant tranquil light. And this empty space cannot be singled out or pointed because it's everywhere. It has no limit. This irreferability of the empty space in Tiantai symbolizes the middle way real attribute, which is absolute middle, which cannot be singled out, which is omnipresent. So that means the empty space is everywhere, then the bodhisattvas are everywhere. Bodhisattvas can be anywhere. Now, gazillions of bodhisattvas sprang up out of the earth, but Maitreya and everyone else in the Lotus Sutra assembly wonders about them. Then Maitreya asks who transformed them into bodhisattvas. Shakyamuni basically says, well, I am their teacher, and these are my children. That answer rather further confused Maitreya and everyone else. So who further wondered, how come you, Shakyamuni, in your only 40 years of your ministry after you reached enlightenment, were able to transform and teach all these bodhisattvas? There are like gazillions. You only have short of time. So Maitreya is pointing out what seems to be contradictory in Buddha's statement. But what's beautiful about Buddhism is its ability to embrace contradiction. So how can it be solved? Well, that's the answer given in chapter 16 by revealing the concept of the eternal life of the Buddha. I mean, if the reality of the life of the Buddha is eternal, that can explain that he's been alive all along and has been teaching and transforming all these bodhisattvas for so many countless years. Then he would be able to say that, well, I am the teacher. But if you read closely the chapter 15, you will find that there are some incipiencies of the eternal life of the Buddha. So for instance, to Maitreya's question, Shakyamuni answers this way. I am the one who has instructed them all, awakening their aspiration for the great way. These are none other than my children. Near the city of Gaya, I sat beneath the Bodhi tree, attained the highest perfect awakening, and rode the unsurpassed wheel of the Dharma. Then I taught and transformed them, awakening their first aspiration for the way. Now they are all abiding in the stage of non-regression, and will, without exception, become Buddhas. I am telling you the truth, so now you should believe it wholeheartedly. I have been teaching and transforming this multitude since long ago, in the remotest past. The final two lines imply that his life is much more than one can imagine as one's biological lifespan. The details about this will be revealed in chapter 16. Okay, so Shakyamuni gives an answer to Maitreya, but how does Maitreya respond to this answer? The sutra says, then the mind of the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya and the countless other bodhisattvas gave rise to doubt. Perplexed by something so extraordinary, they thought to themselves, how could the world-honored one have taught and transformed such immeasurable, boundless myriads of great bodhisattvas and caused them to abide in supreme perfect awakening in such a short period of time? It's incomprehensible that his life has been, continuing from the remotest past? So it doesn't sink in. That's why they're confused. So Maitreya further asks this question, which occupies the next 3 pages until the end of the chapter, by saying this. Only some 40 years have passed since your attainment of supreme perfect awakening. World-honored one, how could you have accomplished so much of the work of a Buddha in so short of a time? All of them have planted their roots of goodness and accomplished the Bodhisattva way, constantly practicing Brahma deeds under immeasurable and boundless Buddhas since long ago in the remotest past. World-honored one, the world will find this hard to believe. This is kind of how the chapter ends. So the chapter ends like Maitreya and others saying, Sir Shakyamuni, come on. And the answer will be given in chapter 16. This is basically what the chapter is saying, but what is more important for you and I, as students of Buddhism, is to understand what this chapter is implicitly talking about, the reality of your life. Let's spend some time on that. The ending of chapter 15 is among my favorite parts of the Lotus Sutra. So if you are a Maitreya Bodhisattva, how would you answer to or have a conversation like this with the Buddha Shakyamuni? he was clearly not afraid of potentially upsetting Shakyamuni, right? Because basically he's saying, what you just said, Shakyamuni, sir, doesn't make sense to me. So please elaborate so that we can understand it. So as someone who's trying to overcome my people-pleasing behavior, Maitreya's speech and braveness is something that I want to practice as well. So he's been a great role model for me. I think this scene has two significant points, at least, that you can start applying to your everyday life from today. And the first is honesty. So Maitreya is very honest about his feelings and ideas. He was not afraid of, speaking the truth about himself and not really caring about pleasing Shakyamuni by pretending that he understood what he said. Rather, Maitreya openly admits his honest feelings and express his non-comprehension of what was just stated in front of everyone in the Great Assembly of the Lotus Sutra. This act is courageous. If he is caring about and minding about what people perceive about himself, he wouldn't be able to say that. So here's what is great about this. So his inability to understand is not clearly the weakness here. It's rather the strength, because he uses his ability to accept and speak about his inability to understand. He transformed his weakness into strength. He's basically transforming his negative quality into some positive quality by fully accepting as it is, rather than trying to change what is negative about himself. This is how the Lotus Sutra shows us a practical, life-transforming model of spiritual liberation. So the true liberation is not an elimination of what seems to be negative about yourself, but rather true liberation is a mastery of what seems to be negative about yourself. So then the liberation starts with clearly seeing what's going on with you and accepting it as is. How would this concept and practice of liberation alter or help you relate to your personal issues that you are struggling with? Here's the second point. Why is Maitreya able to express himself without being afraid? One reason is that Shakyamuni developed meaningful and trustable relationship with his disciples, including Maitreya and everyone else in the Great Assembly, where people can feel safe to talk about their own feelings and very innermost emotions and ideas and so on. This is something we can apply in our everyday life, right? So for instance, like if you have some clients, or if you lead a conversation in a business scene or anything, like a family dinner, anything, this scene of the Lotus Sutra can invite you to reflect like this. How can I facilitate a meaningful conversation with people around me in my everyday life, where people feel comfortable expressing themselves and feel a meaningful connection with me? This, I think, is an essential reflective question for successful dating, building a romantic relationship with someone who's in your heart, building a business, and also including a good relationship with your family, friends, colleagues, strangers, or anyone. So in the Lotus Sutra, we can learn that the Buddha's care for emotions and feelings of his disciples is essential for their liberation. And in the same way, your care for feelings of your potential lover or anyone you want to develop your relationship with is essential for their meaningful relationship with you. And you can start building or repairing any types of relationship by imitating Shakyamuni in your life. This is how you become the Lotus Sutra, and this is how I've been learning Buddhism in this practice in my Buddhist community Rishiko Sekai, and let me put some information in the description box so that you can check it out. And one more thing about Maitreya. So in addition to all these, I think Maitreya was able to express his honest feelings and opinions and raise questions without fear, because he was really serious about his search of truth. So we can learn from this that if you are, serious about something and stumbled upon some questions or wonders or doubts, let's not be afraid of raising that question. You don't have to compromise where your passion goes. That's how the Maitreya sort of exemplifies. Well, that's the chapter 15 and my takeaway from the chapter. So let me know what your takeaways are from this chapter and what you thought about the content of the presentation of this chapter from me. Thanks for checking out. Looking forward to seeing you next time.